In every arena, whether it is sports, music, or battle, there exists a Hall of Fame. Those who manage to stand head and shoulders above everyone else in their field. They are the greats, the legends that define the medium. But even among the best, there is yet still another tier, the greatest of all time. And in the sphere of lightsaber combat, there is no shortage of those who have ascended the mountain to enter the GOAT debate. However, trying to name the definitive GOAT of lightsaber combat is nigh impossible. A case can be made for many great warriors throughout Jedi and Sith histories alike. In this series, we aim to find the very best and simply present to you the case for why they are likely the greatest duelist of all time. Our series began with a man who had left arguably the biggest splash in lightsaber history, Exar Kun. He went totally undefeated at the blade in his day, and became the reason that the double-bladed lightsaber was known as a Sith weapon for 1,000 years. But what no one seems to talk about is that Exar Kun had a contemporary, a partner, and a rival, one that helped him become that legend. But this contemporary did not play second fiddle to his tale. The two crafted one another's legacies, and today's GOAT holocron is about Ulic Qel-Droma, the only one to be known as Exar Kun's equal. Ulic Qel-Droma is the primary protagonist of the Tales of the Jedi comic. In the way we see it, he is the Anakin Skywalker of the Old Republic. Right alongside Exar Kun, he was instrumental to the largest changes in the galaxy, and ever since then, Ulic has gone down in the annals of Jedi history. Every time he's mentioned, his name is immediately accompanied with being called one of the greatest Jedi who ever lived. And many of those commendations come from his battlefield feats alone. Ulic and his brother Kay were both the children of Jedi, resulting in them being born with a strong potential in the Force. But Ulic more so. Their Jedi mother put them under the training of the legendary Jedi Master Jeth, who by this point in time had already been recognized as one of the 3 most powerful Jedi of the entire era. Jeth, being an Arcanian, was called the champion of his people, which is saying something, considering that Arcanians are a notably arrogant people group, who believed that they had reached the pinnacle of evolution. Jeth had brought peace to the Hapes cluster after shutting down an entire army of marauders, and single-handedly brought an end to the Great Droid Revolution of Coruscant. Jeth was now the Jedi Watchman over the Onderon worlds, and on the planet of Arcania, Jeth established a Jedi Praxium, there where he trained a class of students in isolation. Ulic, Kay, and taught Donita were among them. To understand student, we must first understand master. Jeth was a very tough Jedi with extremely high standards. He was not afraid to put his students in situations where they would have been out of their depth, all in order to push them towards greatness. He taught them the true ways of the Jedi, how to rely on the Force alone and to place all of your fate in the light. And the most talented and fearless of all of his students was Ulic. While his brother Kay was more interested in working on droids and technology, Ulic was obsessed with lightsaber combat. According to the Power of the Jedi sourcebook and the complete Star Wars encyclopedia, Ulic Qel-Droma not only mastered Form 5 Djem So, but the art of lightsaber dueling itself before he ever graduated to the rank of knighthood. Let me say that again. Ulic Qel-Droma was considered a master of Djem So as a Padawan. He drilled endlessly against the most advanced droids of the era until they stopped being a challenge altogether. Qel-Droma had become so good that he had outgrown his own time period's technology. He drilled against his peers next, until they too stopped being a challenge. And by the time he was a Jedi Knight, Ulic's confidence had soared to greater heights, which made him somewhat prideful. But just like Anakin, that overconfidence was actually backed up by real, tangible skill. It wasn't wind. None of his peers could best him. Ulic's pattern of fighting was extremely direct. Unlike many of the finer duelists, he rarely wasted any movements on needless flourishes. His lightsaber remained completely still in his hands until the moment of a strike. And when that moment came, it was quick, deadly, and arrived with overwhelming force. Even as a Jedi, Ulic was known to not hold back when fighting his enemies. In this day, the Jedi faced a lot fewer ramifications for letting loose on the battlefield, so Ulic had no qualms hacking apart anyone that stood in his way. One of the things that actually separates Ulic from most Djem So wielders, even making him different from Anakin, is that he did not rely on strength alone to best his enemy. What we mean is that, when we observe the typical Form 5 practitioner, they're prone to battering down their enemy's defenses. When they step into combat and get their blade moving, they begin gaining momentum. Once they have gathered enough velocity in their blade and their motions, they pile drive their opponents until they are forced to relent. We see this in the case of Anakin a lot. Vader does so as well, along with other Djem So practitioners like Malgus and Darth Bane. But Ulic Qel-Droma takes it to a completely different direction. Rather than smashing through his opponent's guard, we notice that he actually undermines them. He will work around his opponent's weapon, and then strike at them directly with overwhelming power. Ulic was so good at ending fights quickly that it became difficult to gauge his technique. Despite Ulic Qel-Droma's pride, it wasn't about showing off. It was more about demoralizing his enemy. It wasn't about inspiring fear or surrender even. It was about efficiency of the most ruthless variant. In a strange way, Ulic seems to treat lightsaber combat like a game of golf. He defeats his enemies with as few strokes as possible. In a way, Ulic's fighting style shares much more in common with Balin's Skull of all people. Though Ulic's blade work isn't as tight or as heavy as Balin's, he allows his body to move much more fluidly, keeping his lightsaber going only in one direction, and that direction is the kill. This is exactly what he did against the Darkside Paladin known as Warb Null. Warb Null was a man who had constructed a massive suit of armor using Sith knowledge gained from the spirit of Frida Nad directly. The suit had been cursed to amplify the power of a Force sensitive while dominating their minds with the dark side. Warb Null was a towering figure who wielded what is known as a Great Saber, a weapon with a significantly larger hilt and a longer blade than a standard lightsaber. Null would lead the Naddis cult against the Jedi Knights on Onderon in order to reclaim the sarcophagus of Frida Nad. During their arrival, Warb Null was able to conquer 3 Jedi Knights at once: Ulic Qel-Droma, Tot Donita, and Os Willem. All of these Jedi were trained by legendary masters. Warb Null's crushing blows and wide strikes kept them all at bay. None were able to conquer because of his baleful presence. The Sith alchemy-infused armor caused him to give off an aura that caused dark vertigo in those near him. But as soon as Ulic engaged him, Warb Null immediately retreated. Later, Null and Ulic would have a rematch. Within the chambers of King Alman of Onderon, the evil king had used magic to trap Master Arca-Jeth. Just then, Warb Null and the Naddis cult members entered the room and surrounded the Jedi. Given into his anger, Ulic Qel-Droma charged Warb Null head-on. And although the Naddis stood in his way, he simply used a whirlwind attack, a technique that involved spinning his lightsaber in a precise circular motion. The maneuver cleared every Naddist in his way, each one taking a single blow to the chest. He then engaged Warb Null, and just as before, the aura induced a dark vertigo within Ulic. But despite being hindered, Qel-Droma defeated the towering giant in 3 moves. They clashed blades once. He flipped over the large man's blade, and then cleaved straight through Warb Null's neck, relieving him of his head. Again, this armor should have been largely energy resistant, but when Ulic struck out in anger, he put all of his power and strength into the blow, causing it to override the enchantment of the armor. And we have to remind you, Ulic was hindered in this moment, not only by the aura of Warb Null, but the dark side permeated on Onderon, causing every Jedi there to be weakened. Enhancing Ulic Qel-Droma's sharp offense was the design of his lightsaber. There are several pieces of art which depict his lightsaber as being much longer than normal. It is customary for many practitioners of Djem So to prefer larger grips, since the form relies so heavily on power strikes. But once again, Ulic shares another similarity to Balin, in that his lightsaber hilt is significantly longer than others. He doesn't quite have a great saber, as Warb Null proves that weapon is a different classification altogether, but Ulic's longer lightsaber allows him to grip the top and bottom for optimal precision and leverage. This is one of the secrets to his accuracy when bypassing one's defenses. But while Ulic was hailed as a valiant Jedi hero, his real power would be revealed when he embraced the dark side and the Sith. Ulic would not reach his peak until his years as a Dark Lord. You see, the young Jedi greatly revered and loved his master Arca-Jeth, and based on context clues, it seemed that he had developed a sort of attachment to his Jedi master. When Arca-Jeth was killed fighting a Sith cult known as the Krath, Ulic swears revenge by any means necessary. He decides to infiltrate the Krath, with the purpose of learning their secrets and destroying them from the inside out. But finally, His own self-confidence was his undoing. Intoxicated by the power that he learns, Ulic plunges deep into the dark side, in the process becoming the very thing that he swore to destroy. He would don a Sith amulet that had once belonged to Frida Nad a millennia earlier, and became an unstoppable force of nature. However, Exar Kun would soon arrive with the intention to remove any and all competition, placing him in direct conflict with Ulic. The two then had one of the most legendary duels ever described in lore. For the first and only time in galactic history, Exar Kun could not win. We spoke in great detail before about how unparalleled Exar Kun was at the blade. He had not just mastered Niman, but had transcended it. He had taken the weakest possible form and made it into something unknowable and unstoppable. Since Form 6 was the mixture of all of the 5 previous forms, Exar had simply mastered those 5 forms and hybridized them with perfect succinction. But his blade style was then augmented with trickery and deceit. He fought ruthlessly, swapping perfectly between deceptive counterattacks and overwhelming offense. But each one of his blows were stopped short this time. Every attack was reposted. Ulic saw through the deceptions and denied him from using them. He accomplished this by doing what he did best, being as direct as possible. The ultimate trickster met the ultimate determination fighter. And when this happened, Exar Kun was forced to fight fair at the risk of his own life. Ulic's blows were too perfect, too efficient. The minimal amount of movement required for his attacks denied Exar an opening to feint or deceive, and all of Ulic's parries and counters kept Kun's savage offense from making a scratch. But just as Exar Kun could not overcome Ulic, neither could Ulic Qel-Droma gain the advantage either. The dark side surrounded them, and the power there caused their amulets to glow, to connect with one another. Unbeknownst to either of them, Ulic was wearing the sister amulet of the one that Kun now wore. The energy awakened the spirit of the ancient Sith kings. They observed the battle, believing that if the fight continued, neither would be victorious, that both Sith would die to each other's power. And this is confirmed by 2 separate sources. The Dark Side sourcebook says this: Exar Kun and Ulic fought, but they were too evenly matched for either to gain the upper hand. Their battle might have gone on for hours, but not for the macabre manifestation of a host of Sith spirits, led by the shade of Marka Ragnos. In addition, this is what is stated by the Power of the Jedi sourcebook. While Exar Kun and Ulic Qel-Droma battled, spirits of ancient Sith lords observed the contest. The Sith spirits saw that the battle would ultimately end with both men dead. Therefore, it would be of no use to the Sith if the fight continued. They immediately stopped the battle and declared Kun and Qel-Droma would be the new Lords of the Sith. This is huge. They fought to a standstill, and the fight was so legendary that Dark Lords of centuries and millennia past gathered to observe, not just Marka Ragnos, but many Sith kings. But now we move a year out from this event. Ulic proves himself in yet another battle, one where the odds were undeniably stacked against him. Ulic is a Sith Lord now, and Mandalore the Indomitable begins moving in on his territory. As the Dark Lord's reputation has grown, Mandalore wishes to test his strength in glorious combat. So Indomitable challenges Qel-Droma to a duel to the death on the world of Kuar. Ulic accepts the terms of the duel and comes into the fight honorably. Ulic leaves his armies at his home and goes with only his lightsaber. However, the Dark Lord is not permitted to stand on solid ground in this engagement. Massive chains wrapped between 2 pillars from a web stand suspended over the plains of Harkul. It is on these chains that Ulic must fight while Mandalore is allowed to fly his war mount. But Ulic is quickly able to deflect the shots from the war mount's cannon fire. The blaster cannons from a Mandalorian war mount were the most powerful and advanced technology of this time. These machine beasts remained relevant for thousands of years after their creation. But when Mandalore gets close, Ulic struck true and destroyed his war mount, forcing Mandalore to fight on the chains with him. Before the duel continued, however, Indomitable accused Ulic of fighting unfairly, his lightsaber giving him an unfair advantage. The Mandalorian demands that he use only a Mandalorian axe. Ulic thinks for a moment, and instead of arguing, the Sith Lord accepts the terms and switches weapons. Even after being hindered in this battle, Ulic emerges victorious through brute strength and will alone. He does not use the Force, just his raw physicality to outclass and overpower Mandalore the Indomitable. And because of this, he earns the full loyalty and respect of the entire Mandalorian clan. Ulic would spare Mandalore the Indomitable, making him swear fealty to the Sith. And from that point on, Mandalore gave Ulic his undying loyalty and respect, the Mandalorians denoting Ulic as the greatest warrior of the galaxy. And so, even in arenas where Ulic Qel-Droma is stripped of his lightsaber and forced to fight beneath him, he emerges victorious without resorting to even using the Force. He doesn't misdirect or trick. He decides to win, and he makes it happen. Some call it arrogance, but his confidence seems to boost his capabilities. As they say, the real battle occurs in the mind. The problem many duelists have, even the greats, is that they doubt themselves. Anakin is guilty of this. He's so afraid to cut loose that he fights well beneath his actual ability, causing him to struggle with beings like Ventress. Whether consciously or subconsciously, Anakin holds back. But Ulic Qel-Droma is immune to this issue. His confidence in his own abilities keeps him from hesitating and second-guessing any of his blows. Ulic decides on a course of action and follows through. This shows in his blade work and his life. If we had to describe Ulic's form in just a few words, it would be stalwart and unyielding. Ulic's endurance-style fighting prowess is made all the more dangerous when he uses the dark side. As a Jedi, his anger caused him to bulldoze his competition. When he was pushed over that edge, he hacked his target down like a weed. As a Sith Lord, he refined this penchant towards anger, perfecting the Dark Rage ability. Darth Rage is when a Force wielder is tapping into their innermost fears, pain, and hatred, converting it into bloodthirsty power and rage, temporarily and greatly enhancing their strength. This increases not just their strength though, but their speed, endurance, and their ferocity. Many Sith Marauders use this technique, but it often left them weak and winded after using it. But Ulic Qel-Droma seemed to be able to turn this on and off at will. He would enter a state of dark rage and plow over his enemies and then pull back with seemingly no drawbacks and no side effects. Many Force sensitives have one ability that they're most known for. For Vader, it's Force Choke. For Exar Kun, it's his Sith magic. But for Ulic Qel-Droma, he rarely manifested any Force abilities outside of himself physically. Like Maul, who specializes in Force Valor, Ulic focused entirely on Dark Rage, and it was this ability that ended up becoming his undoing. In the Battle of Ossus, his brother Kay attempted to talk sense to him. The two men entered a duel after they crash-landed on the world, but the more Kay attempted to reach his brother, the more infuriated Ulic grew. He stopped holding back and used his full hatred, but his dark rage blinded him, and Ulic destroyed his brother so quickly that he had not even realized what he had done until it was far too late. His grief and immediate regret purged all of his dark feelings, and he at once ran to his brother to attempt to heal him. But Nomi Sunrider had watched the entire thing unfold, and in a moment of emotion, she lashed out with a rare ability of her own, Force Light, blinding Ulic to the Force, stripping him of his ability to use the Force. Completely powerless, Ulic was unable to save his brother and lost everything. Ulic Qel-Droma is a titan of blade skill, but his confidence is both his greatest strength and at the same time his greatest weakness. More than once his pride has left him open. He allowed his arrogance to better him. The entire reason Ulic fell to the dark side was because that he believed he was capable of infiltrating the dark side without succumbing to its power, which is of course incredibly naive. Ulic totally overestimated his willpower and became one of the most destructive war criminals in the history of the Jedi. While his confidence rarely leaves him weak, it does leave him open to being outsmarted, and his dark rage ability often causes him to get tunnel visioned on a single target, exacerbating the already existing issue. So while his offense is efficient enough to match Exar Kun, his defense isn't exactly airtight. Having said that, his greatest dueling feat does not even come from his peak, and his final act changes our claim about his defensive issues. 10 years after Exar Kun's defeat, Ulic had attempted and failed to restore his connection to the Force. Ulic found an icy world to live out the rest of his days in exile, out of shame for what he had done. Even there, he attempted to swing his old lightsaber and gain the feeling with it back, but he mentioned that without the Force, it felt like a lifeless tool in his hands. This is brought up many times in the lore, that the lightsaber can never be fully mastered when one does not possess the Force. Even when a Force wielder has their connection temporarily weakened, the difference is immediate and staggering. Darth Bane once mentioned that when his connection to the dark side ebbed, the lightsaber instantly became clumsy, awkward, and slow, and undoubtedly Ulic felt the same. But Force or not, he'd be cornered into a confrontation with an old enemy, a Jedi by the name of Sylvar, who had spent years festering in bitterness over the past. She had lost her mate in the war with Exar Kun, and was unable to avenge him. She was saddened that he had been seduced by the dark side and murdered by Exar. But Kun was gone. All that remained was Ulic. She believed that Ulic should pay for all of the crimes of the Sith, that it was unjust to let him roam free in the stars. She was already considered a legendary Jedi by the time of the Great Sith Wars, which she came out as a veteran of. But after 10 years, she too had begun to slip into the dark side. So when she finally found Ulic, she forced him into a duel by savagely attacking him with her lightsaber. Sylvar was bloodlusted at the time, and had been keeping up her training for years. And Ulic, who was still somewhat out of practice and completely devoid of the Force, had no choice but to duel. Again, with everything placed against him, Ulic held his own perfectly well. He was able to accurately defend himself as he was pushed higher and higher into the ruins of an ancient tower. The two dueled across precious walkways, and although Ulic was given ground, the Jedi's blade never touched him. In fact, he never even attempted to strike back. The entire time he was trying to talk her down, to get her to see the error of her own ways. He did not want her to give in to the dark side as he had, so he convinced her to let go of her need for revenge. In the end, the fully powered Jedi never triumphed over the completely powerless Ulic, and the Jedi stopped just short of delivering a kill blow. And so, even when seemingly cut off from the Force, Ulic remained undefeated at the blade. So my friends, this is our argument for why Ulic Qel-Droma could be the GOAT lightsaber duelist in all of the lore. If anything, he should join the Duelist Hall of Fame and get more recognition for his abilities. Stay tuned on the channel, as we have more GOATs who have now entered the chat. Individuals like Grand Masters, Dark Lords of the Sith, and Regal Blades from Sith myth. We will be eager to see you again in our next lightsaber GOAT video. So until then, what are your thoughts on Ulic? And is he the greatest lightsaber duelist of all time? Does he truly deserve this title? As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching.